I've said this time and time again, but I love it when games or any other kind of media delve into the creepy territory. Whenever a section in a game gets disturbing, that usually ends up being one of the most memorable parts of said game. Now, let's apply that to a character. Disturbing characters are among my favorites in most games I've played, as they can really leave a long-lasting impression on the player with their sick and screwed up personalities. That's essentially what I'm looking for here, creepy or demented characters. Anyway, there's not much more to be said, so let's begin. So usually whenever I make a countdown, I can typically figure out who's going to be number 1 and who's going to be number 10 right off the bat. Except in this case. Yeah, it's kinda hard to find a character who's sort of disturbing, but less so than a lot of the other ones on this list. So I looked really deep. I mean, I started looking at Nintendo games with deep lore and stuff, like Kirby, to see if there was someone there I could work with. Oh! Wait, hold the phone. Okay, so I know what you're about to say. What, Luggo? He's literally just a phone. And honestly, you do have kind of a point, but he sort of bothers me. This telephone dude guides your Octoling in Splatoon 2's Octo Expansion DLC, telling you to collect some funny stuff in order to escape the underground. Now, the story here doesn't really pick up until, like, the very end, so we'll just cut to the chase. After the insane plot twist that you were actually building a blender that the phone was going to use for your execution, with the help of everyone else, you're able to escape and finally make your way to the surface. However, the phone still tries to halt your progress by using this weird genetic ooze to possess Agent 3. And even when you do make it to the surface, the phone comes back one last time, bringing this freaking human statue laser cannon thing with him. Humans in Splatoon is like such a taboo concept that seeing a statue of one is honestly really unsettling. This might sound stupid, but whenever I first got to this part, I was legitimately kinda creeped out. He reveals himself to be Commander Tartar, an AI created by a great scientist assigned with the task of watching over future species and passing on knowledge. He saw potential in Inklings and Octolings, but as he watched them develop, he saw them getting into quarrels over really dumb things, such as fashion, appearances, bickering over small differences, racism. My dude really wants to lecture us about this and then use a human-shaped statue as his weapon of destruction. Tartar somehow reprogrammed itself with a new objective, to wipe out all life and create a new perfect species using its funny blue goop. I've always found Splatoon's lore pretty interesting, and this is the closest it's gotten to being directly a part of one of the main stories. I find it both intriguing and sort of morbid seeing Tartar talk about this long extinct human race. But of course, he's at the bottom because that's all there really is to say about him. I like this creepy little character a lot, and I hope we'll get to see more stuff like this in Splatoon 3. Hopefully. Bro, I freaking love how so many RPG Maker games have weird, freaky stuff in them. I can look at most of those kinds of games and I'll immediately know if they'd be up my alley or not. With that said, I didn't think Jimmy and the Pulsating Mass would ever come up again, but here we are. So if you've played this game before, you may or may not think that this entry is cheating. So it's a good thing that nobody has actually played this game. Throughout the game, Jimmy is exposed to all sorts of strange things, and out of all of them, Jonathan Bear takes the cake. Jonathan Bear is a beloved toy of Jimmy's who joins his party a little ways into the game. He's pretty out of place. Everyone else is a part of Jimmy's family, but now we have a sentient stuffed animal tagging along too. But Luggo, he's just a teddy bear. He isn't so scary. Trust me, we're getting to that. At one point, the party rests for the night, and Jimmy wakes up in the middle of the night to find Jonathan standing in front of a huge furnace. And Jimmy just decides to casually shove him in there. While he's burning, though, Jonathan eerily tells Jimmy that he still knows about his dirty secrets. As it turns out, Jimmy had stolen Jonathan from a store when he was little, and then lied to his mother, saying that he got him as a present from his grandma. This scene is one of the most unsettling in the game, because it takes this bad deed that Jimmy has committed, and not only revealed it to the player, but made it seem so much more sinister than it honestly had any right to be. Like, oh no, boo-hoo, he stole a teddy bear, but like, this scene is actually still really perturbing. After ignoring Jonathan's absence, Jimmy's party reaches a mall, and then find themselves inside the set of Jonathan Bear's TV show, where all of Jonathan's friends are frolicking, having fun, ripping your spine out, and you descend deeper and deeper into this nightmare until you find Jonathan in his grotesque and horrific form. It doesn't matter that Jimmy tried to get rid of him, his actions won't be forgotten that easily. The game has a lot of creepy moments like this, but none of them even come close to the sheer terror of this one. My dude would definitely be higher if he was a major character, but I'm perfectly satisfied with him just the way he is. The build-up and execution of this segment is so brilliant and makes it the most memorable part of the game to me. It's one that I won't forget. Apollo Justice Ace Attorney is an extremely flawed game. It suffers from poor writing, mishandled characters, and overall just being a pretty boring Ace Attorney game in general. However, I do believe that it had a lot of potential, and that's especially evident when we're talking about the overarching story. Yeah, Case 2 and 3 missed the mark in a lot of areas, but 1 and 4 are pretty polished for the most part. In the first case, Apollo, a fledgling defense attorney, is defending legendary attorney Phoenix Wright, charged with killing some random dude named Shady Smith for his first trial. Keep in mind, Phoenix was actually disbarred for presenting forged evidence in court several years prior, so yeah, he's had a pretty fun time. Accompanying Apollo and serving as part of the defense counsel is Apollo's boss, Christoph Gavin, known as the coolest defense attorney in the West. The trial unfolds about how you'd expect it to. This is a first case after all, but then something strange happens. Phoenix points out the possibility of another person being present at the scene of the crime and being the real culprit behind Smith's murder. Through multiple slips of the tongue, Christoph incriminates himself as the murderer, which is really unexpected considering that he doesn't really have a motive to kill the dude. And what adds to the confusion is that Phoenix actually has Apollo present forged evidence to make Christoph incriminate himself once again, but that just makes you wonder if Christoph was actually innocent. But let me tell you right now, there is a reason behind Phoenix's questionable actions. During the final case of the game, Apollo gets wrapped up in another murder case involving the poisoning of Drew Misham, a forger. And this whole murder manages to link back all the way to 7 years ago, back when Phoenix first got disbarred. Around that time, Zach Gramarye, part of the famous Troop Gramarye, was on trial for the murder of his mentor, Magnify Gramarye. Because of his fame, whoever was going to get him acquitted was probably going to get a lot of that sick gamer clout. After turning down one attorney, Zach hired Phoenix Wright as his defense, and the trial goes smoothly until Phoenix presents a page that was supposedly torn from Magnify's journal before his death. In reality, this page was actually forged evidence made by Drew Misham, and because he presented it in court, Phoenix gets his badge taken away, and Zach flees the courtroom and disappears. And over the past 7 years, Phoenix had been recording evidence in order to try and figure out who was responsible for all of these strange occurrences. And all signs point to none other than Christoph Gavin. The person who was originally going to be Zach's attorney was Gavin, until he was turned down due to a game of poker, Zach's abstract method of getting to know someone. When he later saw Phoenix Wright, a lawyer infamous for bluffing his way to victory, he became jealous and hatched a plan to get back at him. Christoph had commissioned the forged journal page in order to guarantee his victory, but because he was no longer in charge of the defense, he repurposed it as a trap to make Phoenix lose his badge. He told his brother Clavier, who was leading the prosecution, exactly what was going to go down during the trial, and it all went according to plan. Afterwards, Christoph had several loose ends to attend to, though. He planted that kind of poison on a stamp and in a nail polish bottle and gave them both to the Mishams in order to silence them. And when Zach finally reappeared under the alias Shady Smith, he killed him as well. However, the poison given to the missions remained dormant for a long time, and neither of them actually ingested any of it until long after it was planted and after Kristoff had been arrested for his other murder, which brings us back to present day. Kristoff did all of this, killed so many people, all because one client declined him. During the second investigation in the final case, Phoenix actually goes to visit Kristoff in his cell, and at one point questions him about his motive behind Zach's murder. This causes Black Psycholocks to appear. Psycholocks are a common occurrence in the series. They show up whenever somebody is hiding a secret or something, but Black Psycholocks are completely new. They're unbreakable under certain circumstances, and we didn't even get to learn all that much about them until the next game in the series. Essentially, they show up whenever somebody is hiding a secret that they aren't even aware of, usually something major like a traumatic event that they don't remember all the details to. So that just begs the question, why does Kristoff have these? Like, we all know at this point that it's because he wanted to cut any loose ends leading back to his old scheming, but I'd like to think that he's aware of his own plan. It makes his whole mentality a lot more questionable, and not helping that is his final appearance. Once he's called onto the stand, Apollo and Clavier are almost able to pin Kristoff as the culprit behind the murder, but they're one piece of definitive evidence away from sealing the deal. And the only reason that Apollo ends up winning the case is due to a deus ex machina known as the juror system that everybody seemingly forgot about. Oh yeah, and Phoenix was sort of in charge of setting that up, and Kristoff is mildly displeased about the whole situation. But here's the thing, Kristoff was not actually found guilty for the murder. It's just that the jurors voted that the defendant was not guilty, so he'll probably get off scot-free. But Kristoff absolutely loses his mind, laughing like a maniac and completely writing off the jurors as slobs and worthless people. Perhaps it's because he got one-upped by Phoenix yet again, a lawyer he deems as below him, an ignorant bluffer who doesn't really know the law, someone who gave him a taste of his own medicine. Kristoff's mindset is really interesting to dissect, because while he isn't my favorite Ace Attorney villain, I think he's a great culprit overall, and one of the most interesting ones to discuss. Perhaps he has a massively inflated ego, or all of these years of hiding his crime has made him insane. Danganronpa. Yeah, knowing me, there had to be a Danganronpa character on the list somewhere. When your game series is about a bunch of morons killing each other because an evil teddy bear told them to, that kind of comes with the territory. Now, while there are a lot of characters in the series who are unbelievably screwed up, it's sorta hard to get disturbed by them due to the game's over-the-top nature. Sure, Monokuma does want everyone to die, but it's funny because he's so silly. However, I do feel like there's one exception to this. Nagito Komeda. Initially, he just starts out as one of Hajime's new buddies, and he even helps him investigate when a murder occurs. He's pretty soft-spoken, doesn't really make much of a strong impression at first. However, during the first trial, Nagito comes under suspicion, and eventually, the pressure gets to him, and he finally cracks. This unveils his true personality, a psycho with a twisted sense of hope. He had set up a plan to murder Byakuya in order to give everyone hope when they all worked together to catch him as the culprit. I mean, it almost makes sense. However, his plan actually didn't come through. Teru found out about it beforehand and tried to kill Nagito before he killed Byakuya, but instead, like an idiot, Teru killed Byakuya on accident, which gets rid of that diddler, thank goodness, but now we're stuck with a lunatic on my happy-go-lucky private resort, and I still would rather have him than Teru. From this point onward, Nagito just does whatever he feels, throwing everyone else off with his crazy actions, or actually assisting in the class trials, through his own unorthodox ways, of course. Actually, that's the best way to describe him. Unorthodox. He tries to bring hope into the world, but never actually does so in a conventional way, always choosing whatever would be seen as insane by any normal human being. And the most terrifying part is that he's smart. Like, Really smart. Very late into the game, through his own scheming, Nagito finds out about a very dark secret regarding all of the classmates. However, he also ends up getting murdered. As the class trial proceeds, the remaining cast eventually figures out that Nagito had planned a suicide in order to make an unsolvable case that would get all of them killed. Except he actually doesn't end up killing himself. He sets up the murder beforehand in a way that makes it look like a suicide, but then everyone realizes that maybe that's a little too normal for Nagito. So they look into the case a little further and come to the conclusion that they're completely screwed. Essentially, when everyone first arrived at the scene of the crime, a fire was started in the building where Nagito's body was found. Everyone grabbed some fire bombs from nearby and threw them to put out the fire. However, what they didn't know was that one of the bombs contained a special kind of poison. And the poison was the true cause of Nagito's death, making whoever threw it the culprit. And there was really nothing distinguishing which firebomb had the poison in it, so nobody knows who threw it. That's horrifically clever, and it would have worked if the group didn't take Nagito's luck into consideration. Nagito's one natural talent is that he's incredibly lucky, and while this is a character trait I know a lot of people have mixed feelings on, I personally think that the way it's handled is great because it makes for unsettling moments such as this. They're able to deduce that Nagito was relying on his luck to make the traitor in their group that has been built up over the course of the game end up being the culprit. It's really hard to explain the traitor's purpose without jumping down a huge rabbit hole, but you really shouldn't be watching this part of the video unless if you've played the game yourself anyway. But essentially, all of the students on the island, excluding the traitor, were all remnants of despair, and he wanted to get rid of them for the sake of hope. This was his sick, twisted, cult-like method of bringing hope. Is it convoluted? Yes. Is it confusing and hard to explain? Maybe a little bit. Is it stupid? Very. But the whole series is all about hope versus despair, and seeing such a twisted form of hope, the good side, is very unnerving. One of the biggest regrets I've ever had making a list was putting Jetsis from Pokemon Black and White at the top of my old insane characters list. By the way, this list is partially a remake of that one. It has a lot of entries that would have been on a second edition of that list. But anyway, while that's not technically a bad placement, giving a character like him so much prestige is honestly pretty unwarranted considering he really isn't that good of a character. And I have no idea why I put him on that list in the first place, considering that there was a much more interesting and more insane character from the same series staring me in the face the whole time. So let's give the spotlight to Pokemon Sun and Moon. At one point in the story, you visit the Ether Foundation, an organization that treats Pokemon with care and provides them with a nice shelter to call home, with a woman named Luggician being the head of the place. While you're here, you were also introduced to the Ultra Beasts, a type of Pokemon that exists in Ultra Space, and are honestly kind of an enigma. They have extremely weird designs, and you don't get to learn about them until much later on. Now obviously, we all know that these people would have literally no purpose in the story if they didn't do something of more significance, so of course they end up doing something of more significance. And honestly, they weren't really subtle about being secretly evil. Later on in the game, it's revealed that they've been working with Team Skull in order to obtain Liddy's Cosmog, which she had originally taken away from the Ether, so that they can summon Ultra Beasts. Cosmog is actually a legendary Pokemon that has the power to open up Ultra Wormholes, a power that Luggician has a great interest in, to say the least. Luggician is also Lily's mother, as well as Gladions, who serves as one of your rivals. Now you might be wondering, why did Lily take away the Cosmog in the first place? What's up with the Ultra Beasts, and what does Luggician want with them? Simply put, Luggician has an uncomfortable obsession for Pokemon. She literally keeps them frozen solid just to preserve them or something. Nobody ever told me that there was an expiration date on these things, but most importantly, she's absolutely enamored with the Ultra Beasts. To quite the extent, so much so that she began to neglect her own children. She ends up traveling to Ultra Space, and much later on, when Lily and the player both arrive, Luggician refuses to leave. She is so attached to these abominations that she has no issue whatsoever merging with Annihilego, despite the potential consequences, including all of the porn. born. Out of every Pokemon villain, she's no doubt my favorite due to this unique take. Is she evil? Not necessarily, but her obsession with the Ultra Beasts and Pokemon in general drives her to do things that have adverse effects on those around her. And what creeps me out the most is a detail that I've only ever seen a handful of people acknowledge. When pre-release trailers were being shown off, people were drawing comparison between Lily and the Ultra Beast Nihilego's designs due to how similar they were. I remember a lot of fans, including myself, thinking, oh, this weird thing looks just like a Lily. However, when you actually play the game yourself, you may realize that way of thinking is incorrect. Think about it. Nihilego doesn't look like Lily. Lily looks like Nihilego. Makes Lily's design change after her crazy mother's plot is revealed all the more significant. Beholder is a game series I'll probably never bring up again. I didn't play the first game all that much, and while I do like the sequel a lot more, it didn't leave a noticeable impact on me. You'd think it'd be right up my alley with the dark subject matter, working in a totalitarian government building, but I think the gameplay leaves much to be desired. It's hard to get super invested in the story when the game occasionally gets sorta tedious. Though, the most engaging section of the game has to be the middle section when you get your first promotion and move up to a new floor in the building. The chief of this floor being one Albert De Salvo. The first thing you're greeted with when you arrive here is a giant freaking shredder in the floor used for various business practices. Now, to be fair, if I was in a position of power, installing something like this would be my first order of business as well. However, De Salvo actually barely acknowledges the shredder or the little super game run on the floor to weed out any underperforming employees. Yeah, our workers aren't doing well enough. Okay, let's just dispose of them properly. No, De Salvo has much more important matters to attend to. While he is an intimidating character on the surface, it's not until you go snooping as usual that you learn a lot more about the guy. Eventually, you can uncover that he has a torture chamber hidden in his office. Fun place where all of the Fortnite porn creators are brought to suffer. While a lot of things in the room are rather graphic, the worst has to be the chamber in the middle, filled with a bunch of blood. And what Evan finds inside of there is a dead child. I mean, it is all just for the sake of his interest in the human psyche, seeing how much brutality someone can take before they crack, and he isn't going to limit his disgusting experiments at all. And of course, these nasty little details do end up getting him arrested, should you choose to let that happen, because, you know, it's fine to let someone in a position like his to cover up stuff like this. While De Salvo isn't quite as deep as other characters on this list, I think he was guaranteed a spot based on his sheer impression alone. I think that this dude is the reason why I like this whole section of the game so much. This game can get pretty over the top while still remaining dark, and this floor is the perfect showcase of all of that. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Memorability can be a really major positive point. And while there are other horrible people in the world of Beholder, none of them are quite as memorable as Albert De Salvo. While Resident Evil is home to all sorts of freaks and deranged weirdos using viruses and whatnot for their own personal gain, I can't really say many of them fit the bill for this list. I've said this time and time again, but sometimes the games are really silly, so you can't really take the stories all that seriously. Then there's Resident Evil 7, which somehow has just as many silly moments, but I can actually take the story seriously. Now don't get me wrong, 7 doesn't have some super deep story, it's just solid and I like it a lot more. One major point of praise goes to the main villains, the Bakers. Not only are they extremely entertaining, but they're also pretty tragic too, since they aren't really in control of their actions due to them being infected with a special kind of mold. More on that later. Anyway, let me just go ahead and say that this same sympathy cannot be applied to Lucas Baker.
Now, if you want the head, feel free to come by any time and I'll give it to you.
From the second you meet Lucas, you can sort of tell that he's kind of an asshole. I mean, no well-respected member of society just throws a bowl of spaghetti or whatever at their house guest. Oh, but his misdoings don't end at wasting perfectly good food, trust me. While he doesn't have as much of a presence as Jack, he's certainly a lot more cruel, outright torturing some of the people the family has kidnapped. He'll set up the most complex mechanisms, traps, and death games all for the sake of his own entertainment. And whenever one of his hostages is participating in one of these death games, he always treats it like a TV show almost. It's honestly really funny, but it just kinda serves to distract you from all the terrible stuff he's doing. And in the main game, you never actually get to deal with him directly. When you escape from his reused happy birthday trap, he runs away and you don't ever see him again. But then, the DLC comes in, which not only showcases more of his horrific torture devices, but also shows you another side of him that wasn't shown before. So for some context, late into the main game, you find out that before the events of the story, a bioweapon referred to as Evelyn was developed and transported on a tanker that crashed near the Baker residence. Evelyn is able to infect people with a special kind of mold that has all sorts of effects on their bodies, such as hallucinations and unnatural regeneration. She even had control over whoever she infected. The Bakers brought her in, and she almost immediately infected all of them, including Lucas. However, Lucas was actually approached by agents of the company responsible for creating Evelyn, and he received a serum that would prevent her from controlling him. He then worked with those same agents to spy on his family and provide data about Evelyn to them while pretending that he was still under her influence. He has so little care and respect for his family, using them as lab rats almost, not showing any sort of concern for their eventual deaths at all. Heck, he doesn't even care about the people that pretty much saved him. He gets most of them killed and cuts ties with the organization before going to sell the info to a different client altogether. His twisted nature is put on full display in the Not a Hero DLC, where he holds several of Chris's allies hostage and kills them all in brutal ways. It eventually all catches up to Lucas though, and he gets his just desserts. He's manipulative, disturbingly intelligent, and most notably, cruel. The dude was obviously a bad seed, and the sheer amount of horrible stuff he got away with cannot be compared to other villains in the series. Okay, well, maybe some of them had higher body counts or something, but Lucas's kills are played a lot more straight, and they're a lot more horrid too. Oh, that, and I can take this game's story a little bit more seriously, as if I haven't said that a dozen times already. Yeah, don't worry, I'm running out of Lisa characters to talk about in these countdowns. But you gotta admit, the material this single game has given me to work with over all these years is pretty damn impressive. I only got like, what, 2 or 3 more characters I can talk about? I mean, who cares? Let's just cut to the chase. Throughout Brad's journey through the wasteland of Olathe, he frequently encounters a man named Buzzo and his Joy Boys. They distribute a drug called Joy throughout the land, one that makes you feel no pain whatsoever, but has adverse side effects. Anyway, they take special interest in Brad. Every time they cross paths, Buzzo always submits Brad and his party to some form of torture, such as having to choose between killing off a party member or Brad losing one of his arms. Anytime his crew shows up, it's always unsettling because you just realize, oh crap, something terrible is about to happen. He has this dreadful aura surrounding him that's unlike anyone else on this list. But it's not some random meaningless torture for the funnies. He's doing this as a form of punishment. He never makes it clear to Brad directly, but Buzzo blames him for the death of someone close to him. When Buzzo was a kid, he was friends with Brad's sister, Lisa. However, Brad abandoned Lisa and the rest of his family because they were both growing up in their father's abusive household. This left Lisa to fend for herself. Even with her father's torment, Elisa was still able to find time to talk with Buzzo. However, she was very manipulative of him. At one point, she got Buzzo to cut a cat with a saw, and afterwards, she demanded that he cut her to make her look less attractive so her father wouldn't, well, you know. But no matter what she did, the only way she was able to escape from all of this was to take her own life. Buzzo, from this point forward, made sure to get revenge on Brad for not being there to protect her. The reason why Buzzo even distributes Joy in the first place is because of an agreement with Dr. Yado, the man who caused the Flash and made Olathe into the place it is today. He literally cooperated with the most evil person in the world. all in exchange for getting Brad to himself. When Brad dies and turns into a joy mutant, Buzzo immediately captures him and treats him like an animal, and it's not until this moment that he finally realizes that his revenge really wasn't worth it. He went out of his way to ruin someone else's life as well as the whole world because of a situation Brad probably couldn't have helped if he tried. However, he does attempt to redeem himself by helping out Buddy and killing Yato before dying and turning into a mutant himself. He let his misdirected anger control him, which not only harmed all of Olathe, but it costed him his own life as well. A.I. Somnium Files, while not one of my favorite visual novels, does a great job at building up its mystery and has an equally great payoff as well. The game revolves around Konami Date and his AI eyeball companion Aiba investigating a series of murders. There's a lot of delving into people's minds and investigating to find clues, and depending on the choices you make, you can find yourself going down multiple pathways in the story. However, some paths leading to the true ending are locked until you do all the others. And throughout all of these routes, the game throws multiple curveballs your way with all sorts of insane and intense moments. It really makes every single character you meet seem really suspicious. And this all comes together in a finale that's going to be very, very difficult to describe. Spike Chunsoft has a very good talent at making stories that are really interesting, but really hard to tell other people about. Now I'm just going to bring up the bare necessities for context because I don't want to be here all day talking about unrelated stuff, so excuse me if I miss some details. At the very end of one of the routes, Date finds a video of his boss killing Congressman So Sajima. He finds her and decides to sync with her to find out just what's going on. And the truth he discovers is pretty terrifying. He realizes that this isn't Boss's mind at all. It shows various murders throughout the game and multiple different characters committing them. This may leave any normal player absolutely confused, but Date manages to deduce that despite what's being shown, all of these murders were actually executed by the same person. That person managed to find a way into Boss's body and reveals himself to be Saito Sajima. Saito is the son of So Sajima. He's been mentioned very little throughout the story, but as it turns out, he was a lot closer to us than initially thought. Saito was a very troubled person. He had a brain condition that literally prevented him from feeling happy under normal circumstances. And killing people was the only way he felt any sort of joy. Because of this, he used to work with the Kumakura gang, a Yakuza group, so that he had more opportunities to kill people. Now you might be wondering, what's he doing in someone else's body? Several years prior, the Kumakura's leader, Rohan, was taken in by the police for multiple reasons, and they had the bright idea to utilize one of the sync machine's defects. When you sync with someone, you get to go inside their mind. However, if you stick around for too long, then eventually both minds would start to swap bodies. The police tried using Rohan's body in order to find out more about the gang's connections. One of the members, named Falco, swaps bodies with him and visits Saito, who quickly finds out about the scheme and tries using the sync machine's error for himself. This results in Falco and Saito swapping bodies, and Falco losing his memories. Falco, now in Saito's body, is found and given the name Date, with no other information given to him, and Saito begins his plan to get revenge on Date and to get his body back. This whole time, he's been body hopping, getting his hands on various characters, swapping bodies with them, then killing them while they're in the body that he was formerly occupying. And in the final route of the game, he manages to capture Date and force him to swap bodies with him. Date gets trapped in Saito's horrifying somnium, unable to do anything as he loses the only body he ever remembers having. This is one of the most wild and terrifying twists I've ever seen in a game, and it's handled so well. We've covered several other murders on this list, but Saito stands out. He's certainly not a deep character, but hearing familiar voices talk in a so much more sinister form is nothing short of scary. Especially when he gets his body back, and now you get to see these demented facial expressions on a person you were so accustomed with seeing. The presentation of his scenes, including the reveal, is nothing short of incredible. And the only reason he got stopped was because of Aiba and her self-destruct program. I mean, being a book game helps too, because all you have to do to win is read. Granted, that's still pretty difficult for some people. Most of this list has been characters that are creepy or insane, But Saito is definitely in the scary territory. And now begins the old countdown tradition of who could possibly be number 1? The characters on this list have all been disturbing in their own ways, and after the previous entry, it's kinda difficult to imagine there being anyone more screwed up. And while some might disagree with this top spot, I can't think of any character that not only is beyond deranged, but also so great. And to find them, we'll have to search the enigma that is the town of Silent Hill. A series beloved for its psychological horror and various forms of symbolism throughout the stories. But we're not actually going to Silent Hill, because the 4th game doesn't even take place there. Silent Hill 4: The Room takes place in apartment 302. The tenant, Henry Townshend, has been trapped inside for several days before finding a hole in his bathroom. And from here, he visits all sorts of weird worlds with strange monsters and other people just like him. Throughout the game, most of the people Henry meets end up dying in the dream worlds, and when he wakes up, he finds out that they're dead in the real world as well. And every one of them has numbers carved into their bodies. And as Henry explores more, you soon learn that all of this is related to a man named Walter Sullivan. Walter was responsible for several murders a few years prior. He killed 10 people, carved a number into their corpses, and then took their hearts. After the 10 murders, he was supposedly captured and then committed suicide in prison. Throughout the dream world, you begin to learn more and more about him. You even encounter him directly at one point, but you don't even know it's the man himself. Later on, he even starts chasing Henry and his neighbor Eileen, trying to kill them both. With all that said, you might be wondering, why is this dude even doing all of this? Well, Walter was actually born in the very same room that Henry is the tenant of. His parents, however, were very abusive and clearly didn't want a kid, so one day, they completely abandoned Walter in the room. Frank Sunderland, the superintendent, found Walter. He even kept his umbilical cord because, I guess he thought that'd make for a nice souvenir. And Walter was eventually turned over to an orphanage called Wish House. What the crap is that pronunciation? Wish House was extremely strict and would heavily affect his worldview in the future. He would also frequently go all the way to Ashfield just to visit room 302. As ridiculous as this may sound, the room imprinted on him, and he began to believe that the room was actually his mother. He never really had any parents growing up, so the days he spent in there as a baby made him really comfortable with the place. The same way other people would feel around their mother, or really any guardian of theirs. Around that time, Dahlia Gillespie, a cult leader and the villain of the first game, would visit the orphanage, and through her, Walter learned of the 21 Sacraments ritual. The ritual involved killing 21 people in order to awaken the cult's deity. Walter must have thought that if he went through with this ritual, that he could awaken his mother and be with her peacefully forever. Halfway through the process, he's even required to take his own life. Henry even finds Walter's corpse in the walls of the apartment late into the game. Don't ask me how he got past the old tenant. By the way, this is how he actually died. The prison suicide was a false report. Through this part of the ritual, his other world was created. Like I said earlier, this series is very symbolic, and this whole game revolves around Walter. The worlds you visit, the enemies you encounter, these are all representations of his memories. Memories of a poor child whose worldview was manipulated for the benefit of some cult. Henry even encounters Walter's younger self a few times, despite his older self being present as well. There's obviously a stark contrast between the two. It's almost like a split personality. When you encounter Walter, he doesn't even seem half as disturbing as a lot of other characters on this list. He does come off as a creepy weirdo, but he's very soft-spoken and only wants Henry and Eileen dead for the sake of the ritual, not because of any ill will. What puts Walter above everyone else, however, is how much you get to learn about his life and his corruption. If he wasn't born to an unloving family and raised by an uncaring orphanage, maybe he could have been a normal human. By learning so much about this character's past, I began to feel really sympathetic towards him, knowing that this innocent child would eventually become a monster. I know that Silent Hill 4 gets a lot of mixed reception, but I personally really liked it. It's my favorite in the series. This whole game makes for a really intriguing character study, and I know that Silent Hill is known for stuff like that, but this is my favorite story in the series. And I have this character to thank for that. This one screwed up, sad character. This wonderful horror game wouldn't be the same without him. I'm Luggo the Luggician, and thank you very much for watching.